I'm going to need you to step away from the window, ma'am. There are other clients waiting." The man who said it was Gregory Falk, and he said it the way some people say please, a word shaped like courtesy with nothing courteous inside it. He wore a navy suit pressed to a blade's edge and a lapel pin shaped like the Meridian crest. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. Men like Gregory Falk had learned long ago that the system did the shouting for them. Naomi Adjei did not step away from the window. She stood with her weight even on both feet, in a charcoal wool coat she had owned for 11 years, and a pair of low black shoes that had walked a great many marble floors. Against her chest she held a single manila folder, plain, unlabeled, the kind you could buy 100 of for $9. Her face held nothing a camera could use, no anger, no fear, no plea. She looked at Gregory Falk the way a geologist looks at a fault line, with patience and with the certainty that it would move. "I'd like to complete my withdrawal," she said. "I've provided 2 forms of identification and my account number. The amount is $4,000 from an account that has been mine for 19 years. The clock above the vault read 4:09, 21 minutes until the State Financial Regulatory Board's filing window closed at 4:30. She knew the exact number of minutes. She had been counting them since she walked through the brass doors. "Our records flag this profile for enhanced source of funds verification," Falk said, sliding a glance at the young associate beside him. "Non-standard account profiles require a secondary review. It's a risk management protocol, I'm sure you understand." There is no such protocol. There has never been such a protocol in any handbook Meridian Private Bank has ever printed. But Falk said enhanced source of funds verification for non-standard account profiles with the smooth confidence of a man reading scripture and the young associate beside him, Marcus Dale, 9 years on this floor. Looked down at his keyboard and said nothing at all. "Which profile," Naomi asked quietly, "is the non-standard one?" Falk smiled. "Procedure requires me to verify before I can release funds of this size." Funds of this size. She let the phrase sit in the air. $4,000 in a private bank whose smallest client kept 7 figures on the premises. "I see." At the far end of the floor, a woman in a cashmere wrap completed a wire transfer of an amount Naomi could not see and would not need to. No one asked the woman in cashmere about the source of her funds. No one flagged her profile. The associate who served her smiled, stamped, and thanked her by name. 2 security guards drifted closer to the marble half-wall, not yet summoned, only aware, the way weather is aware of a coastline. A retired schoolteacher in line behind Naomi shifted her purse to her other shoulder and looked very hard at the ceiling. The careful blindness of someone who has watched this scene before and learned that watching costs nothing only if you do it from far enough away. A young teller at the next window slowed her typing to a stop. A man in a Carhartt jacket near the door pulled out his phone, glanced at Falk, glanced at Naomi, and began, quietly, with the camera held low against his hip, to film. Nobody told him to stop. Nobody in the room seemed to know whose job that would even be. Marcus Dale opened his mouth, then he closed it. His silence was not nothing. His silence was a decision, made the way most such decisions are made, in the half-second between conscience and mortgage. When a man invents a rule on the spot, and a room full of people agrees to obey it, where exactly does the rule live? When the people who keep an institution running have learned that the safest sentence in any language is, "I'm just following procedure," who then is actually in charge of the building? And what does it cost a man like Gregory Falk to be wrong about the woman standing in front of him when she is holding in a $9 folder against an 11-year-old coat? A document he has not yet imagined and will not survive? 7 months earlier, Naomi Adjei sits in a rented office above a dry cleaner on Callaway Street, where the radiator knocks twice an hour and the whole room smells faintly of pressed cotton and machine steam. The desk is a folding banquet table. The chair came from an estate sale. A single window looks out onto a bus stop, and when the 14 idles below, the glass hums. The rent is $1,180 a month, and she pays it 9 days late more often than she would like. Her car is a 2009 Accord with 211,000 miles and a check engine light she has named. Her phone bill is $74. Her mother's supplemental insurance is $312 a month, and Naomi pays it without telling her mother she pays it. Her father will not let her pay anything. He is 66 years old and still works the overnight security shift at a building downtown, and the one time she offered, he said, "Save your money, baby, I've got my own." The operating budget for the largest financial undertaking of her life lives in a spreadsheet with a single tab and a balance that has never, in 18 months, exceeded $9,400. The phone buzzes. It is her cousin Desmond, in Halvorson City's East Ward, and she knows before she answers that the heat got shut off, and she is right. She does not hesitate. She does not run the math out loud. She moves $240 from the account that cannot afford it into the account that needs it. And she tells Desmond it's a loan so that he can keep something that is not quite pride but is close enough to live on. Then she goes back to the spreadsheet because the spreadsheet is not really a spreadsheet. It is a door. For 2 years she has been building something most people would have called impossible if she had been foolish enough to say it aloud. She has been assembling a coalition, a quiet alliance of community development funds, a pension trust for transit workers, a pair of patient family offices, and her own savings down to the last verified dollar. To acquire the controlling interest in a bank, not a storefront credit union, not a symbolic stake. The whole holding company that owns Meridian Private Bank, an institution that for 91 years has managed the wealth of Halvorson City's oldest families and turned away, with flawless paperwork, almost everyone who looked like the city around it. It has cost her 11 months of red-eye flights she paid for in airline points and aching knees. A relationship that did not survive the 18th canceled dinner. A reputation, in certain rooms, as the woman who would not stop asking why the denial rates on the east side ran 4 times the rate downtown when the income gap did not. 41 investors said no before 9 said yes. She kept the no's in a folder too. She read them when she needed to remember exactly what she was building against. The coalition is not glamorous. It is a community development fund out of the East Ward that has financed corner stores and dental practices for 30 years. It is a pension trust for the city's bus drivers and sanitation workers, 4,600 members who do not know yet that their retirement now owns a piece of the bank that once redlined their grandparents. It is 2 family offices run by people who made their money and remembered where they made it. And it is Naomi. Every verified dollar she has, and a personal guarantee that means if this fails, she does not start over. She ends. It matters because it is not hers. She is 43 and she has done the arithmetic of a lifetime. A bank does not change because someone shames it, and it does not change because someone marches outside it. The denial rate on the east side ran 4 times the rate downtown for incomes that were, on paper, nearly the same. That gap was not an accident. It was 1,000 small decisions made at 1,000 small windows, each one perfectly explainable, each one perfectly deniable. A bank changes when the name on the controlling certificate changes, and when the person holding that certificate has read every loan file, every denial. Every quiet little protocol invented at a window to send a tired man home without his own money. The day the results arrive, it is 10:43 in the morning, and she is standing at the dry cleaner's counter downstairs, picking up the one good suit she owns when her attorney calls. The regulatory approval has cleared. The federal letter is signed. The transfer is complete. As of this moment, Naomi Adjei holds majority ownership of the holding company that owns Meridian Private Bank. She does not celebrate. She thanks her attorney, hangs up, pays for the suit, and tucks the dry cleaning slip into her coat pocket out of habit. Then she does the thing that any reasonable owner would delegate to a lawyer, a team, a press release. She decides to go in herself. Not to the executive floor, not to the boardroom with her name about to go on the wall, to a teller window on an ordinary afternoon as an ordinary customer named on an ordinary account, to make an ordinary withdrawal because she needs to see with her own eyes and not from a quarterly report. Whether the thing she has spent 2 years and everything she owns to fix is real, or whether she has bought a beautifully papered lie, there are 3 clocks running the day she walks in, and she lays them out in her mind on the bus ride downtown, because the numbers are simple and brutal. The first clock is professional. The State Financial Regulatory Board's confirmation filing must be lodged by 4:30. If she misses it, the acquisition review reopens for 60 days and the outgoing board. Men who have run Meridian like a private club will have a window to challenge her ownership in front of a regulator who plays golf with 3 of them. The second clock is public. At 7 o'clock, she is the keynote speaker at the Equity in Banking Summit in front of 400 people and every financial reporter in the state. There is no version of the evening where she does not show up. The third clock is the one that has no deadline she can negotiate and the only one that can break her. At 6 o'clock, in the lobby of the very building she now owns, her father, Naomi Adjei, will be honored for 40 years of service as a night shift security guard. She promised him she would be there. She has never broken a promise to her father in her life. 3 clocks. One afternoon. And the only person in Halvorsen City who knew all 3 was sitting on a city bus in an 11-year-old coat, holding a $9 folder, on her way to find out what her bank really was. She was 9 years old. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of cold that gets into the seams of a coat. And her father had just come off a double shift and still smelled of the floor wax they used in the old federal building where he worked nights. He had not slept. He had a paper check folded in his breast pocket, 2 weeks of overnight hours, and a daughter holding his hand because her mother was working and there was nowhere else for Naomi to be. They walked into the First Halvorsen Savings Branch on Mercer Avenue at 3:15, into a lobby that smelled of radiator heat and old carpet. And they waited in a line under a clock that ticked loud enough to hear. When it was their turn, the teller, a young man with a tie clip and a careful smile, looked at the check, and then he looked at her father, and then he looked at the check again. He asked if it was really his. He asked where he worked. He asked, in a voice pitched just low enough to keep it from being a scene, whether there was someone who could verify him. Naomi remembers the exact quality of her father's stillness. He did not get loud, he did not get small. He set his canvas work bag on the counter and he opened it, and one by one he laid out his pay stubs, not 1, not 2, but every stub he had kept for 3 years, rubber banded by month, in an order only he understood. He laid them across the marble like a man laying down a hand of cards he had been holding his whole life. The badge from the federal building, the letter from his supervisor, the voided check with his name printed on it. He did not say a word while he did it. He just let the counter fill up with proof, until the young man with the tie clip had nowhere left to look. Then her father leaned down to her so close she could smell the wax and the cold on him, and he said the only sentence he said that whole afternoon, "Let the record speak, baby." A pause. They can argue with you all day. They can't argue with the record. The young man cashed the check. He did it quickly, the way people move when they want a moment to be over. Her father gathered every stub back into its rubber band, put the bag over his shoulder, took her hand, and walked her out into the cold, and he never mentioned it again. Not that night, not ever. He did not need to. The lesson was not in anything he said. The lesson was in the order of the stubs, in the patience of a tired man who had decided, long before that Tuesday, that he would never beg a building to believe he was real. That lesson did not leave her. It became the architecture of everything she built after. She did not grow up to be loud, she grew up to be exact. She went into economics because economics is the study of records, of who is counted and who is left off the ledger, and what the gap between them costs. She became the woman in every meeting who had already read the appendix. When she challenged a policy, she did not raise her voice. She produced the footnote. When men explained banking to her, she let them finish, and then she opened the file. They can argue with you. They can't argue with the record. She had spent 34 years turning her father's pay stubs into a method, and the method had carried her from a folding banquet table above a dry cleaner to a controlling interest in a 91-year-old bank. Which is why, of all the days of her life, this one mattered most. Because today she would walk into a building like the one on Mercer Avenue, and someone would look at her the way that young man looked at her father, and she would have folded in a $9 manila folder, the most complete record she had ever assembled. Not pay stubs this time, a certificate of ownership. And she had not come to argue. She had come to let the record speak. She arrived at 3:38. Meridian Private Bank did not look like a place where anyone was ever turned away. The floor was honey-colored marble that threw the afternoon light back up toward a coffered ceiling. There were no velvet ropes, no plexiglass, no laminated signs, only deep leather chairs arranged like a club, fresh lilies on a side table, and the low, upholstered hush of a room built to make wealth feel like a birthright. A greeter in a slim gray suit asked if she had an appointment. Naomi said she only needed a window, and the greeter's smile thinned by a degree she was meant to notice and did. The associate at window 7 was Marcus Dale. He was somewhere in his late 30s, with a tie a little brighter than the room called for and the open, slightly anxious face of a man who had spent 9 years being careful. When Naomi set her 2 forms of identification on the counter and gave her account number, he typed it in, and for one ordinary moment everything was exactly as it should have been. He read her name on the screen. Something moved across his face, recognition or the ghost of it. He glanced up at her, then back at the monitor, and his typing slowed. "Ms. Adjei," he said. "A withdrawal, 4,000. Let me just, 1 second." His voice was friendly. The clock above the vault read 3:41. It might have ended there. Most injustices are not events. They are 1,000 small chances to do the ordinary thing, and the ordinary thing, this time, was a stamp and a count of 20s. Marcus reached for the cash drawer. That was when Gregory Falk came across the floor. He did not hurry, because men like Gregory Falk do not hurry. Hurry is for people who can be told no. He had seen Naomi's name on the floor monitor at his own desk, and a series of small, perfectly defensible thoughts had assembled themselves in his mind in the time it took to button his jacket. A $4,000 cash withdrawal, an account he did not recognize from the wealth management roster, a woman in an 11-year-old coat who had asked only for a window. Each thought was reasonable. Each one had an answer that did not require him to ask himself a single hard question. He arrived at window 7 the way a cold front arrives, politely and changing everything. "I'll take this one, Marcus," he said, and Marcus's hand stopped over the drawer. "Ma'am, I'm Gregory Falk, Senior Relationship Manager. There's just a small additional step on withdrawals like this." He smiled. "Our records flag this profile for enhanced source of funds verification. Non-standard account profiles require a secondary review before we can release cash. It's a risk management protocol." There it was. A sentence with the cadence of a rule and the substance of a fog. Enhanced source of funds verification for non-standard account profiles. It is in no handbook. It has never been in any handbook. But it had the 4 parts every such sentence needs. A verb that sounds like care, an object that sounds like fraud, an adjective that sounds like not you, and a noun that closes the door. And when a thing is built that well, who in a quiet marble room is going to be the one to say it isn't real? Naomi did not get angry. Anger was what the sentence was built to harvest, anger she could be blamed for, anger that would let the room relabel the problem as her. Instead, she did what her father had taught her on a Tuesday in November. She got exact. "Mr. Falk," she said, "I'd like to understand the protocol you're citing. Could you tell me the policy number?" The smile held. "It's an internal risk classification." "Then, could you show me where it appears in the account services manual?" "I'll wait." The clock read 3:52. "I'd also note that this is a withdrawal from a deposit account I've held for 19 years, not a transfer of incoming funds. So I'm not sure source of funds review applies at all. But I'm happy to be corrected by the document." For the first time, something behind Falk's eyes recalculated. He had expected one of 2 responses, the 2 he always got: the apology of someone who assumes they've done something wrong, or the outburst of someone who hands him the right to call security. He had not budgeted for a woman who asked for the page number. She was not arguing with him. She was building a record of him, and he could feel it the way you feel a draft from a door you can't see. "These reviews are for everyone's protection," he said. "I'm sure you can appreciate that in this environment we have to be careful." "I appreciate care," Naomi said. "Care is documented. Could you note the time you initiated the review and the specific risk indicator so it's on the record?" She set her 2 IDs squarely in the center of the counter, a small, deliberate act, like a chess player advancing a pawn she has no intention of losing. "I'd also like the name and title of the supervising officer who can authorize the release once the review you're describing is complete." "I'm the supervising officer." "Then there's no one above you I'd need to wait for." She let that settle. So the only thing standing between me and a withdrawal from my own account is a protocol you haven't been able to cite, conducted by an officer who reports to no one on this floor. Is that an accurate summary, Mr. Falk? I want to be sure I have it right. The clock above the vault read 4:01:29 minutes until the filing window at 4:30, clock 1, ticking somewhere behind her ribs. The only one in the room she could not see, and the only one that could cost her the bank itself. She did not glance at it. She had learned long ago that the moment you check the clock, you have told the other person where to press. Falk's jaw worked once. He had run this play 100 times and won it 100 times, because the play was never really about the customer. It was about the room, about everyone else agreeing, by their silence, that the rule existed. He looked at Marcus for that agreement. Marcus looked at his keyboard. I'll need to pull the file, he said, and turned the monitor a few degrees toward himself, away from her. He thought she couldn't see it. She could. In the half-second before he angled it away, the screen showed her account in good standing. No holds, no liens, no fraud flags, no alerts of any kind. 19 years of clean history scrolling in a column he had told her 30 seconds ago was the problem. And beside it, in a small internal notes field most customers never knew existed, a line someone had typed into her record at 3:43 that afternoon, 2 minutes after Marcus first read her name and 1 minute before Falk ever reached the window. She read it once. Profile inconsistent with branch clientele, recommends secondary verification before disbursement, GF. There it was, in 11 words, the whole machine written down. Not a slur, not a single word anyone could be fired for. Profile inconsistent with branch clientele. It did not say her name, her age, her neighborhood, her coat, her skin. It said inconsistent, and it let the reader fill in the blank, and it let Gregory Falk go home at night. A man who had only ever followed his instincts about risk. The cruelty was not in the sentence. The cruelty was in the distance between what the sentence said and what it meant. The gap her father had taught her to measure on a Tuesday in November. The gap that 1,000 people walked through every day without ever being allowed to name it. Naomi did not change her expression. She did not point at the screen. She did not say, "I saw that," because saying it would turn a record into an accusation. And an accusation is a thing a man like Falk knows exactly how to survive. Instead, she filed it where she filed everything, in the place her father had built in her 34 years ago. The note had a timestamp. It had initials. It would still be there at 4:30 and at 5:00, and in every audit she would order in the weeks to come. The record was speaking. All she had to do was let it. He had been standing at window 4 for 9 minutes before Naomi noticed him, and the moment she did, she understood she was watching her father. He was perhaps 71. He wore a clean denim jacket gone soft at the collar and a faded cap with a unit patch stitched above the brim, Army, a war that had a number people had mostly stopped saying. He had a careful, upright way of standing, the posture of a man who had decided a long time ago that he would always be neat in rooms that did not expect him to be. In one hand he held a folded sheet of paper, the kind a hospital prints out, creased into quarters and then smoothed flat again so many times that the fold lines had gone white. "It's $420, he was saying to a teller who would not look up from her screen. "From my own savings. My wife, she's got a procedure in the morning, they need the deposit tonight before midnight." He set the hospital paper on the counter the way her father had once set down pay stubs. "I've banked here 11 years. 11 years this April." "I understand, sir," the teller said, in the voice people use when they do not. "There's a temporary hold on the account pending a security review. I'm not able to override it." A temporary hold, a security review. The same machine wearing a different coat. No one had said a single forbidden word. The clock above the vault read 4:04. Gregory Falk stood 6 feet away, close enough to hear every word, and he did not turn his head. He had built the weather in this room, and now he simply let it rain on someone else. And here is where Naomi Adjei did the hardest math of her life, and she did it in perhaps 11 seconds, standing very still in an 11-year-old coat. She ran the clocks. Clock 1, 26 minutes until the filing window closed at 4:30, and her attorney needed her confirmation before he could lodge it. If she stepped out of her own quiet standoff and into his, if she made a scene, Drew security became a known quantity in this branch before the paperwork was safely filed. The outgoing board would have exactly the incident they needed, an altercation involving the incoming owner to demand a 60-day review and challenge everything 2 years had built. Clock 2, the summit at 7 o'clock, 400 people, every reporter in the state. Clock 3, her father, in this very lobby at 6 o'clock, 40 years honored, a promise she had never once broken. Everything she had: the coalition, the pension trust, the 4,600 bus drivers, her own last verified dollar, her father's whole night standing guard in a building she was about to own. All of it sat on one side of the scale. On the other side stood a man with a creased hospital paper and $420 of his own money. If she stayed invisible for 26 more minutes, she kept all of it. If she spoke now, she risked all of it. And the cruelest part of the arithmetic was this: the very document in her folder, the one that could end this in a sentence, was also the thing the outgoing board was waiting for her to wave around too soon. Reveal it before 4:30 in a scene, with phones recording, and they would call it exactly what they needed it to be: an unstable new owner causing a disturbance on the floor, and they would have their 60 days. The folder was a key. It was also, until 4:30, a loaded gun pointed at her own foot. When a person has the power to stop an injustice, but stopping it might cost them the very power they were going to use to stop 1,000 more, is staying silent prudence? Or is it just cowardice that has learned to do arithmetic? She looked down at her phone. 3 messages waited on the screen, 3 names she did not yet open. She looked back up at the man at window 4. And then he did the thing that made silence impossible. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply nodded slowly, the way men of his generation nod when they have been told no by a building one too many times, and he reached up and took off his cap, took it off indoors. At a bank counter, an old soldier making himself smaller, apologizing with his whole body for the trouble of asking for his own money. "It's all right," he said quietly, folding the hospital paper back into its worn quarters. "I'll figure something out. Sorry to take your time." Her father had refused, once, to make himself small in a room like this. He had laid down the record instead. And watching this man do the opposite, watching him fold himself away so politely that no one would even remember to feel ashamed, Naomi understood that there was no version of walking out of this building with her dignity intact that did not begin right here at window 4. With a stranger and a hospital deposit and 26 minutes she could not spare. She moved. She did not announce it. She did not explain. She simply crossed the marble floor toward window 4, and she did not look back at the clock. Marcus Dale watched her go, and he knew, with the certainty of a man who has worked 9 years on a single floor, that this was the point past which nothing would return to how it had been. He opened his mouth. A word formed, a warning, a question, an offer, he would never be sure which. Then he saw Gregory Falk turn, and he closed it again. His silence, in that moment, was not the absence of a choice. It was the choice. He would carry it for a long time. Naomi reached the old man's side. "Sir," she said gently, "put your cap back on. You don't have to take that off for anyone in here." That was when Gregory Falk decided to end it. "Ma'am." His voice came across the floor, louder now, pitched for the room. "I'm going to need you to step away from the window. There are other clients waiting." The clock read 4:09. He turned to one of the guards by the half wall and lifted 2 fingers. "Can we have some assistance at window 4, please?" The guard started forward. Slow, unsure, but forward. Falk kept talking, and now he was not talking to Naomi at all. He was talking to the room, building the record first, the way he always did, so that whatever happened next would already have a story attached. "We've had 2 individuals this afternoon attempting non-standard transactions," he announced, "to no one and to everyone. We take the security of our clients' assets very seriously. 2 individuals. The old soldier. The woman in the old coat. Sorted, labeled, filed in a single sentence in front of 40 people who would remember it the way he wanted it remembered." He leaned over Marcus's shoulder at window 7 and, without asking, tapped 3 keys on the keyboard. On the screen, a status changed. Account access, restricted, pending review. He had frozen her in her own bank with 2 seconds and 3 keystrokes. And he had done it in front of everyone so the room would understand that he had the authority to do it, and she had no authority to stop him. That was the real transaction, not the $4,000. The demonstration. "Sir, why don't we step over here?" the guard said to the old man, not unkindly, taking him by the elbow the way you steer someone who is no longer the bank's problem. The soldier let himself be moved. He had been moved out of rooms before. He went quietly toward the side wall, his cap still in his hand, his hospital paper still folded into its worn white quarters. And he found a chair near the lilies and sat down in it the way a tired man sits down anywhere he is finally allowed to. Marcus stood frozen at window 7, watching the restriction he had not typed glow on a screen with his name still logged into it. The man in the Carhartt jacket near the door lifted his phone higher. A second customer began to film. A third turned to a fourth and murmured something, and the murmur moved through the room like a draft. The retired schoolteacher had stopped pretending to study the ceiling. Naomi's phone buzzed against her palm. 3 messages. She opened them. From her attorney, Renata, filing portal open. "I need your one-word go-to lodge, closes 4:30, hard. Where are you?" From the summit organizer, David, green room at 6:45 sharp. "Press wants you early, you're on at 7, tell me you're coming." From her father, Kwame, "Got my good shoes on, baby. They gave me a chair up front, 6 o'clock, don't be late for your old man, 3 clocks. 3 people who had built their evening around her keeping a promise. She read all 3. She answered none of them. The clock above the vault read 4:11:19 minutes. The guard was 5 feet away. Falk had a phone to his ear now, an internal line, and he had turned half away, lowering his voice, but not enough. "Yes, the $4,000 one, she won't disengage," he was saying. "No, nothing on file, but the profile's wrong for the branch, you can see it. I'd rather we get ahead of it before it becomes..." A pause. "Right, I'll have security walk her out." He thought she could not hear him. She heard every word. The profile's wrong for the branch. The same 11 words from the screen, now spoken aloud, the quiet part said into a telephone by a man who believed completely that he was the reasonable one in the room. This was the moment it was supposed to be over. This was the moment the math broke. 19 minutes, a guard at her shoulder, a freeze on her own account, her name about to become an incident, every clock she carried running out at once. A lesser script would have her shout here. A lesser life would have folded here, the way the old soldier folded, the way the room expected the woman in the old coat to fold. Falk had spent his whole career in the certainty that everyone, eventually, folds. That the system does not have to be right, it only has to outlast you. She thought of her father, sitting in a chair up front in his good shoes, saving the seat beside her. She thought of how he had stood his whole working life in lobbies like this one, all night, in the dark, so that men like Gregory Falk could walk in each morning and feel that the building was theirs. She thought of the order of the pay stubs on a counter on a Tuesday in November, and the sentence that had become the architecture of her whole life. They can argue with you, they can't argue with the record. How many promises in a life are kept, not by rushing, but by refusing, at the exact moment everything tells you to rush, to become someone your father wouldn't recognize? Naomi did not look at the guard. She did not look at Falk. She did not look at the clock she could feel burning down behind her ribs. She walked back across the marble to window 7, unhurried, the only unhurried person in a room that had begun to vibrate, and she set her plain manila folder down on the counter where everyone could see it. Then she opened her laptop, turned it to face Gregory Falk, and typed one word to her attorney, "Go." It was 4:13. She did not raise her voice. She turned the laptop one more degree until the screen faced Gregory Falk directly, and she opened the plain manila folder beside it. Then she waited, not for permission, but for his attention, the way a teacher waits for a room to go quiet on its own. "Mr. Falk," she said, "you asked me to verify the source of my funds. I'd like to do that now. On the record." She took out the first document and laid it on the counter, flat, the way her father had laid down pay stubs 34 years ago. "This is a certificate of controlling interest issued by the State Financial Regulatory Board," she said. "Reference number SFR B4419. It records the transfer of 64% of the voting equity of Halvorsen Financial Group, the holding company that owns this bank, to a purchasing entity. The transfer cleared regulatory approval at 10:43 this morning." She set a second sheet beside it. This is the accompanying authorization letter from the Federal Supervising Agency, countersigned and timestamped. And this, a third page, is the schedule of beneficial owners of the purchasing entity. She paused. She looked at him. She let his eyes travel down the third page to the line at the top of the schedule, and she let the room hold its breath while the man's mind did the arithmetic she had already done. The majority owner is listed there, she said quietly. Adjei, Naomi K. He read it twice. She watched him read it twice. What that means, Mr. Sterry. Falk, she went on, in exactly the voice he had used on her, measured, procedural, almost gentle, is that the source of my funds is the controlling ownership of this institution? It means that for the last 11 minutes, you have been refusing a withdrawal to the person who, as of 10:43 this morning, holds the deciding vote on this bank's board. It means the freeze you placed on my account at. She glanced at the screen. 411 was an instruction issued without authority against your own employer. None of that is an accusation. It's just what the record says. Falk's mouth opened. He stopped. He tried again. You set this up. You came in here. You planned this whole thing. I came to my bank to withdraw $4,000 from a 19-year-old account, Naomi said. I gave you 2 forms of identification and asked you to follow policy. Everything that happened after that was your choice, recorded by your own system on your own timestamps. I didn't plan a single decision you made today. I only watched you make them. She drew out the last set of pages, and this one was thicker. During the acquisition, my team reviewed this branch's transaction data, lawfully, through the due diligence data room. I'd like to share what the record shows. She did not read it as an attack. She read it as an auditor reads a ledger. Over the last 90 days, this floor applied a discretionary secondary verification hold to 406 transactions. 291 of those holds, 72%, were placed on accounts in 3 zip codes east of the river. Those zip codes account for 11% of this branch's deposits. The median hold downtown lasts under 4 minutes. East of the river, it lasts 2 days. Same bank, same policy book, different math. She turned one more page. At 3:43 this afternoon, a note was entered into my account. 11 words. I won't read them aloud. They're in the file, with your initials and the time. At 4:04, a temporary hold was placed on Mr. Foster's account at window 4, a veteran, 11 years a client, $420 of his own savings, a hospital deposit due tonight. This isn't about today, Mr. Falk. Today is just the day someone was standing in the room with the data and the authority to act on it. Each of those decisions, she added, carries a legal meaning, whether anyone intended it or not. A discretionary hold applied along lines that track a protected characteristic is not a customer service problem. It is a fair lending exposure, reportable to the same federal agency whose letter is sitting on this counter. The bank has been carrying that exposure quietly for years, on your timestamps and your initials, written down by the very system that was supposed to keep it safe. You didn't break a rule today, Mr. Falk, you documented one. She closed that folder. She turned to window 7. Marcus. Her voice did not change. There was no judgment in it, and there was no forgiveness in it either. There was only the work. Release the hold on Mr. Foster's account. Process his withdrawal now and wire his hospital deposit tonight at the bank's expense for the inconvenience. Then, by Monday, I want every account flagged for secondary verification on this floor in the last 90 days on my desk, with the officer's initials and the elapsed time on each. You know how to pull it. You've always known how to pull it. Marcus's hands were already moving. Yes, ma'am, he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. She crossed to the side wall, to the chair near the lilies, where Eli Foster sat with his cap in his hands. She crouched so they were level, the way you do with someone you have no intention of looking down at. Mr. Foster, your money's released. The deposit will reach the hospital before midnight. I'll see to it myself. Put your cap back on, sir. You've never once been the problem in this building. It took 90 seconds. No one asked anyone's permission because the only person whose permission mattered was the one already kneeling by the chair. Then she stood, and she looked at Gregory Falk one last time, and she said the last thing she would say to him that day. Fairness isn't just a moral principle, Mr. Falk. In modern banking, it's a competitive advantage. Institutions that treat people with dignity outperform the ones that run on assumptions, and I can show you the data. You spent today protecting this bank from a customer. Starting Monday, your job is to protect its customers, or it won't be your job." She closed the laptop. She looked at the clock above the vault. It read 4:24. Her phone screen still glowed with the message from Renata, lodged 4:21. "We're clean." Clock 1 had stopped, 6 minutes to spare, and not one of them spent on Gregory Falk. The room changed the way a room changes after a glass breaks. First the silence, then the slow understanding of what is now on the floor. The tellers had stopped working. A woman at the next window pressed 2 fingers to her lips. The man in the Carhartt jacket lowered his phone, looked at the screen, and did not stop the recording. He just exhaled, long and slow, like someone who had been waiting his whole life to film the right thing. He would post it that night. He would caption it with 6 words and no hashtags, and by morning it would be the only thing the city was talking about. But that was tomorrow. Right now he simply held the camera steady because some moments ask you to be a witness, and he had decided, somewhere around 4:11, which kind of witness he was going to be. A young teller 2 windows down was crying without sound, the way you cry when something you'd stopped believing in turns out to have been true the whole time. An older client in Kashmir, the same woman whose wire transfer no one had questioned an hour before, set down her pen and looked, for the first time, all afternoon, at the room she had been standing in. Gregory Falk did not shout. He did not weep. He simply sat down slowly in the leather chair behind window 7 that was not his, and he looked at the certificate still lying on the counter, and on his face was not rage but the specific, grinding arrival of a man recalculating 30 years of small defensible decisions all at once. He had been so careful. He had a sentence ready for every one of them. And not one of his sentences could argue with the record. Marcus Dale processed the withdrawal, and then the wire, and his hands trembled, not from fear now, but from the weight of 9 years of looking down at a keyboard while the weather rolled across his floor. He had known. That was the thing he would carry. He had always known, and today, in the half-second when a word might have mattered, he had closed his mouth. He typed the override, and he typed it correctly, and a single tear stood at the corner of his eye and did not fall, because some debts are not paid by crying. They are paid by doing the work, every day, for as long as it takes. Eli Foster put his cap back on. He did not cry either. He stood squared the brim with both hands the way he had once squared it in uniform, and he looked at Naomi with an expression that had no name. Something between a salute and a thank you and an apology for a country that had made the thank you necessary. "My wife," he said, "will sleep tonight." That was all. It was enough. Naomi Adjei gathered her 3 pages back into the $9 folder. She did not look back at Gregory Falk. She did not make a speech to the room. The room would tell its own story now, on a dozen phones, and it would tell it better than she ever could. She walked toward the brass doors. And what was in her mind in that moment was not the certificate, not the 64%, not the look on Falk's face. It was a chair up front, in a lobby a few floors up, and a man in his good shoes saving the seat beside him. She lifted her phone and called her father. He answered on the first ring. "I'm on my way," she said, nothing else. She had never once broken a promise to him, and she was not going to start at 4:25 on the best day of her life. Marcus Dale still works on the same floor, at the same window, but the title on his badge is different now. When the bank stood up a fair access review team, he did not wait to be asked. He walked into the new community banking chief's office on the second day and said he wanted to lead the part nobody wanted, the audit of the floor's own holds. The one that would require him to read, line by line, every discretionary decision made over 3 years, including his own. He built the dashboard himself, a simple thing that flags any hold lasting longer than the branch median and routes it to a second reviewer within the hour. It has caught 119 holds in 90 days that would once have quietly run for 2 days. He is good at the work. He is relentless at it. And in the top drawer of his desk, under the spare chargers and the breath mints, there is a single printed page, the screenshot of an 11-word note entered at 3:43 on an afternoon in spring. He keeps it where he can see it when he opens the drawer. He has never told anyone why. Some debts are not paid. They are carried on purpose so you never again mistake silence for safety. Gregory Falk was not marched out of the building that afternoon, and Naomi made sure of it, not out of mercy but out of principle. An institution that fires by spectacle has only learned to perform fairness, not practice it. Instead, an independent firm conducted a 90-day review. It was slow. It was thorough. It found that the discretionary hold pattern was not Falk's invention. It was a culture he had inherited and then perfected, the most prolific practitioner of a habit that predated him by decades. The findings substantiated repeated holds applied along lines the bank's own written policy forbade. He was offered the same due process any employee would receive, and at the end of it, the record, his timestamps, his initials, spoke for itself. He left the bank in August, not to a chorus of applause, but to the quiet, unglamorous sound of a system finally doing the thing it had always claimed to do. There was no revenge in it. There was only, at long last, accountability that could survive an audit. Eli Foster's wife came through her surgery. She is, as of this writing, 3 months into a recovery the doctors call ahead of schedule. Mr. Foster still banks at Meridian. He says he's not the type to switch over one bad day, and besides, the coffee in the lobby got better. He comes in on Thursday mornings. The young teller who cried that afternoon knows his name now and his wife's name and asks after her every week. One Thursday he came in and found Marcus at the window, and the two men shook hands for a long time and said almost nothing, the way men do when the thing between them is too large for the lobby. He keeps his cap on now, every time. And once, when a new customer at the next window started to take off his own hat out of the same old reflex, Mr. Stesting, Foster leaned over and said kindly, "Leave it on, son, you don't owe this place that." He had learned it from a woman in an 11-year-old coat, and now he was teaching it forward, which is the only way anything like dignity ever actually travels. Meridian Private Bank is, by the numbers, a different institution. The median secondary verification hold east of the river fell from 48 hours to under 4 minutes, the same as downtown. Discretionary holds branch-wide dropped from 406 per quarter to 38. New account openings in the 3 eastern zip codes rose 31% in a single quarter. The board approved a $40 million community lending commitment with published quarterly reporting, so that no one has to take the bank's word for it. And a fair access audit, once a thing that happened to the bank from outside, now happens 4 times a year from within, with the results posted where customers can read them. None of it is PR, because PR is what you do instead of changing the number. This changed the number. The numbers are the apology. The change held, and it held for a boring, durable reason. It was built into the wiring, not the messaging. Marcus's dashboard does not care who is on the board or what the quarterly mood is. It flags an outlier hold whether or not anyone is watching, and it routes that flag to a second human being within the hour. The Fair Access audit is on the calendar the way payroll is on the calendar, not a campaign, a function. 3 months in the bank's own analysts noticed something the executives had spent 91 years insisting could not be true. The eastern branches, the ones the old model had treated as a risk to be managed, were now among the fastest-growing deposit pools in the network. Dignity had not cost the bank money, the assumptions had. Treating people as the threat had been the expensive thing all along. The spreadsheet had simply never been allowed to say so out loud. The video did what videos do, only more. The man in the Carhartt jacket posted it that night with a 6-word caption, "They told her to wait." She owned it, and by the following evening it had passed 14 million views. A state representative cited it on the floor of the legislature while introducing a bill to require banks to log and report the demographics of discretionary holds. The press took to calling it, over the bank's objections, the Foster provision. 2 competing institutions announced policy reviews within the week, which is the corporate phrase for, "Please stop filming us." A legislative subcommittee scheduled hearings on discretionary holds in retail banking for the fall. One quiet afternoon, one old soldier, one woman in an 11-year-old coat, and a machine that had run unexamined for 91 years, finally had to look at itself in a camera. What the video could not show was the part that mattered most, the part that does not film well, the 1,000 ordinary Thursdays that came after, in which a hold got flagged and reversed by someone whose name will never trend for a customer who will never know how close they came to being sent home without their own money. That is the real legacy of an afternoon like this one, not the reveal, which is rare, but the rewiring, which is permanent. A viral clip is a spark. Whether anything is still warm a year later depends entirely on the boring people who showed up the next morning and changed the defaults. The young teller who cried that afternoon, her name is Daniela, and she had worked at Meridian for 8 months and had almost quit twice, asked, the week after, to be trained on the new review process. She said she never wanted to stand at a window again and feel her stomach drop and her mouth stay shut. She is the one who catches most of the flagged holds now because she remembers exactly how it feels to watch and do nothing, and she has decided she will spend her career making sure fewer people have to. She is 26. She will be very good at this for a very long time. That too is part of what happened at 409, not just one woman with a folder, but a room full of people who saw that day what it looks like when someone refuses to fold, and quietly decided they would try to be that too. Naomi Adjei does not stand at window 7. She hired a community banking chief who is better at the daily work than she will ever be, because the point was never for her to be in every room. The point was to change what happens in the rooms she will never enter. These days she is mostly looking forward, at a second holding company in a second city with denial rates that look very familiar. She is building the fund that will buy it, and this time the coalition came together in 11 weeks instead of 2 years, because now there is a video and a set of numbers, and a thing that used to be called idealism and is now called a case study. She keeps the folder of 41 rejection letters in a drawer next to a single new page, an invitation to testify before the fall subcommittee hearings. She has not decided yet whether she will go as an owner or as the daughter of a night shift guard. She suspects the honest answer is both. As for the third clock, she made the ceremony. She walked into the lobby at 5:58 that evening, 2 minutes early, and she sat in the chair her father had saved beside him. And when they called Naomi Adjei's name for 40 years of standing guard in the dark, she stood and clapped until her hands hurt, and she never once told him what had happened, 4 floors below at 409. He found out from the video, like everyone else. He called her at midnight, and all he said was, "You laid down the record, baby," and she said, "You taught me how." She kept one thing from that day, and it was not the certificate. It was the image of an old man taking off his cap in a bank, making himself small to ask for his own money, and the question that came with it, the one she has not been able to put down since. Here is what the story proved. Something good happened. A man got his money and his dignity in the same afternoon. A bank that had run on quiet assumptions for 91 years was forced to count what it had refused to count, and the counting changed it, in numbers you can check. Accountability won. Dignity turned out to be measurable, achievable, and, this is the part that should give everyone hope, profitable. That is all real. None of it should be taken away. But the story proved something harder to celebrate too. Naomi Adjei won because she had 64% of the voting equity in a manila folder. She won because she walked in already holding the deciding vote on the board. She won because, on the worst afternoon of an old soldier's month, the person standing next to him happened to be the one human being in the city with the documents and the authority to make it stop. Take the folder away, and the story ends at 4:11 with a freeze on her account and a guard at her shoulder and a video that goes nowhere. So the question is not really whether systems can change. We just watched one change. The question is the one she carries, the one in the image of the cap coming off. How many systems only change on the single afternoon that someone with power happens to experience, firsthand, the thing everyone else experiences every day? How many people walk through that same door in that same coat and reach the same window without a certificate in their bag, without a board seat, without 64% of anything, and simply fold and go home? And are never filmed? And what does it say about all of us that the story we love to tell, the one that goes viral, is the rare one that ends in a reveal, and not the 10,000 every single day, that end in a man putting his cap back on and saying sorry to take your time? She got her ending. Most people get the silence. The work, the only work that matters, is building the kind of room where you don't have to own the bank to be believed in it. We are not there. We are not close. But something shifted in that lobby that is harder to reverse than it looks. A number got written down. A pattern got a name. a camera turned on, and a man who had a careful sentence for everything finally met the one thing his sentences could not answer: the record. None of that fixes the world. All of it makes the next person's fold a little less inevitable. And it is very, very hard to stop counting a thing once someone has finally made you write it down. At Voices We Carry, we don't soften the emotion or dilute the message. We tell powerful fictional stories inspired by real-world issues that too many people face in silence. If today's story moved you, if it made you think, made you feel, or made you see something you couldn't unsee, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because the conversation doesn't end here, it's just beginning.